Hello, I'm Charles Gibson, and this is the day it happened, the Columbine shootings. It started with gunshots in the schoolyard just before lunchtime, and then the carnage moved inside. For more than 4 hours on that Tuesday, Columbine High School near Littleton, Colorado, became a killing ground.
Holloway would not mind if I said that amidst all the turmoil and grief that she and others are experiencing, she said to me just a moment ago that perhaps now America would wake up to the dimensions of this challenge if it could happen in a place like Littleton, and we could prevent anything like this from happening again. We pray that she is right.
The Columbine school shooting will forever go down in history as the massacre that changed America's view of restrictions on guns. People wondered where the responsibility came in with the right to own firearms. After Columbine, the concept of gun safety had taken on new meanings. Some blamed guns, while others blamed mental health. Though there was mass confusion tangled in this mass shooting, one thing was for sure: responsibility in the right to bear arms had been lost. Columbine was a devastating school shooting that took place in Littleton, Colorado, leaving 21 injured and 13 dead. In 1999, it wasn't abnormal to hear that something unfortunate had taken place in a big city like Chicago or New York, but it shocked people to hear a massacre like this had taken place in rural Littleton. It made people wonder, if it could happen in Littleton, Colorado, could it happen here too?
No, I just couldn't believe something like this could happen here. I mean, we thought it was safe, you know?
A lot of emotion running high around here, students we've talked to.
Awful.
Not only did it shock the public, but it also threw off the SWAT teams and the police officers during the attack, delaying the time they got into the school by an hour and a half. The reason for this? Because something of this severity had never happened before, and there was no school shooter plan. The immediate response to this tragedy was, how did they obtain those weapons in the first place?
Their older friends were able to purchase them, and unfortunately the laws in America are such that you don't have to control the actual firearm. One person can purchase it and then give it to another individual.
Many didn't and still don't know that buying guns from a private and unlicensed seller is perfectly legal.
Within minutes, the 13-year-old easily and legally bought a .22 caliber rifle from a private seller and walked away with it.
America was left anxious and worried after the tragedy, and there was no telling what would happen next. In response, the government put in security measures that had never been implemented in schools before, such as metal detectors and guards.
It's been proven that in plenty of times that our schools are vulnerable, and our children are the most vulnerable people that we have, so I think we should protect them the best we can.
As for its effects on guns and ammunition distribution, that's a little more complex. Shortly after the shooting, there was a protest against the annual NRA meeting in nearby Denver. The protest established by a 70% majority stricter background checks at gun shows, where one of the Columbine shooters got their guns. After mass school shootings, there is often an immediate response from the public to ban the firearms responsible for these tragedies. But that response often triggers opposition from pro-gun advocates, and they tend to get even more protective over the Second Amendment.
Is no greater personal individual freedom than the right to keep and bear arms, the right to protect yourself.
Because they believe that gun control means taking all guns away, when in actuality, responsible gun owners wouldn't be impacted.
And legislation can't prevent all of them. So what I want is for responsible gun owners to realize that with rights come a grave responsibility.
Due to these fears, there was very little policy change after the Columbine shooting, which only strengthened opposition to gun control initiatives.
From my cold, dead hands.
Many survivors of Columbine and relatives of victims have spoken out against gun violence. For example, Tom Mauser, the father of Daniel Mauser, who tragically was killed.
I make public presentations, I get very, very choked up 20 years later. It's okay. That's grief. But in the end, still the biggest thing is I have to do what I think Daniel would want me to do. And I think I'm doing what he'd want me to do.
Tom Mauser has devoted his life to help end gun violence alongside the former principal of Columbine.
Man who was the principal of Columbine High School during the 1999 shooting that killed 13 people is launching a nonprofit to help victims of tragedies. The Colorado Healing Fund is being called a first-of-its-kind organization to support victims of mass tragedy crime in Colorado.
There have also been foundations created in memory of the victims, such as Rachel's Challenge, which helps students around the world deal with bullying and aims to prevent gun violence.
And to hear the stories of her and read her writings, and she began to really become a role model to me after she had passed. I didn't know some of the things that she was thinking and feeling.
The Second Amendment had been debated before Columbine, but it is nothing compared to what happened after. Along with questioning the Second Amendment, the tragedy at Columbine created a host for copycat school shooters. Unfortunately, the shooters ended up getting the notoriety and fame they wanted, and caused others to try and recreate and emulate the massacre. Since Columbine, there have been over 360 school shootings. With the hundreds of school shootings America has under its belt, it made people ask, how many times does this need to happen before something is done about it? Well, some pro-gun right organizations such as the NRA, Gun Owners of America, and the Second Amendment Foundation believe gun violence has to do with the person and not the gun.
It's not the gun, it's the person with the gun that don't know how to act.
But other pro-gun control organizations like Everytown, Giffords, and Violence Policy Center believe there shouldn't have been a gun in the first place.
A Tech 9 semi-automatic 30-bullet weapon like that killed my son is not used to kill deer. It has no useful purpose.
Of course, the government has put regulations in place, such as background checks, but these have not worked to the degree they were intended. This is because people will always find loopholes.
Talk about Daniel and how he has taken up his son's cause.
He's the one who brought up the question to me about there being loopholes in our gun laws. And, you know, he was killed with a gun that was purchased through one of those loopholes in our gun laws. And I felt like I had to act on that, and I feel that's one of the ways that I honor him.
But that doesn't mean there hasn't been some success. States with strict gun laws have had very low percentages of gun violence. For example, California and New Jersey. But of course, there are some states with more permissive gun laws, such as Idaho and Mississippi, who have had high levels of gun violence. Leaving it up to the states is problematic, because someone could go to a state with lenient gun laws, obtain the gun, and bring it back home to their home state. A better solution would be to have these successful strict gun laws implemented nationally. It's been 25 years since Columbine, and one thing that it has taught us was that though we have the right to bear arms, we still have a responsibility to keep others safe.
Something is wrong in this country when a child can grab a gun so easily and shoot a bullet into the middle of a child's face, as my son experienced. Something is wrong.
Though it's important we have our individual freedoms, we need to find a way to be able to protect our society as well.
There are clearly people in society who should not have guns.
By making sure we remember and learn from our mistakes, we can ensure that the victims of Columbine were not lost in vain.
Shooters wanted to make a negative impact on this world, so my decision was that I want to leave a bigger impact, but in a positive way.
We must push for a future free of gun violence so we can end the repetition of history.